We're here to have just a conversation about the cemetery, and I just wanted to say yippee yippee yahoo, I'm glad to see you. The reason I say that is an old friend of mine, Charlie Lord, that ran the Carver Hill Orchard, one day came by the cemetery and saw me, and he calls me over. His son was driving him. These were sometime just before he passed, and he says, "Boy, am I glad to see you." And I says, "Well, Charlie, it's always glad to see you. I've known Charlie for over 40 years, and I've been here since about 1970. So he was up in Bolton. That's where I used to hang. I used to live in Lancaster. And he continued on saying, "I'm glad to see you." And I says, "It's always glad to see you." And I thought he was just repeating it for prosperity reasons. To find out what he was meaning was, because if I don't see you, I know you put dirt on me. So he has been one of my mentors. He was one of the guys that was glad that I took this position on. This was a part-time gig. I thought that it was just going to last a few years, if even that. And what ended up happening is that part-time job turned into a career that actually followed my passion, was helping people and working with nature. After that point, I also found my passions was working really with nature. So that's one of the reasons that kept me here, but the main reason that kept me here were the folks like yourselves that I made relationships with that wanted to be able to see their final arrangements in a capacity to where we could help them. So today, we're just going to find out what you folks are really looking for, and we're going to interact. We're going to have a little... I have some fun with it, and you guys don't mind that I let my hair down today. I got rid of my uniform because I just didn't feel ready for that. None of you are in uniform, so I said, I know this. So one of the things that in your handout that you saw was that one of my experiences was learning that the pre-planning, I've seen it where people wait to the last point of things. I've seen people come in planning on things, wanting to be there, and seeing the troubles that it could help with families. Because all of a sudden it turned out where they're making rash decisions. They want to have this. They're not sure what to do. Burials were a fashion that there's full burials, there's cremations. We're actually even looking into what there now is become somewhat green burials, which there's a lot going on with it. There's a little more work involved because people think it's a lot easier, but they're soft things. They might be in weaves. The Jewish community has been doing it for years. We don't have a section devoted to that yet, but we've been bringing that up in discussions. They don't use vaults. They don't use a few things. There's a cost savings there, but the real situation is just like the older cemeteries, Lower Village and Hillside. There's 3 cemeteries. Most active is in Brookside off of Gleasondale Road. In the older sections, they never were required to have vaults. The state doesn't require vaults, but the cemeteries rule that they would like to have vaults because of liability issues. The older cemeteries, they would fall, the cavities would come in when the boxes broke. There was workers. There was a guy that was here last time I spoke was Alex Gray. He used to work there. He fell in. So what they used to do was dig down a bit, never disturbing any of the bones, compact it back down, and refill it. We run lawnmowers now that weigh over 400 pounds plus the driver on there. To be efficient, we try to do that. We're here to save you people as much money as we can by the way that we do it. We have 15 acres with Lower Village and Hillside, and this is what Brookside looks like right now. When you buy a plot It's $600 now, and in July it's going to be $800.
She can't hear you.
She can't hear? Well, where's that microphone now? This is what the cemetery looks like now. Where is headband? He took that Mac away. This here, when you buy a plot, $600, $300 went to perpetual care, and $300 went for construction on burials and stuff, on roads. We spent $90,000 to build a half a mile of roads. It never cost the taxpayers anything. We're expanding out. We're in this section right here, and as we keep going, there's about 1,400 grave lots here. A lot of towns do not have that option. We're selling row by row as things go along. You can see that and it made it a lot easier. In this area back here, we plan on putting a building out there. And that's what we're hoping to see somewhere in the near future. This is the way it works. You can see that a photograph showed, and you can pass this around. This is what it's starting to look like. This is the newer section where we're at. This is what's been built here. That's an air view. It's going on around. This is our first paper drawings. You can see where we started to have some kind of electricity and planning on having a building back there. On the very back is Minister's Way. That's off of 117. You can pass that around and get a gander of where we're at. This is
like the old post office.
The post office would be way down here of
The old.
yep, down around in here.
Oh, okay. Oh,
That's the White House. It'll be right over that way. Come July, we are raising the prices to be competitive with the other towns. Was a thing that was going on for years. So this did not have anything to do with this, but we want every so many years, Allison has asked me to talk about cemeteries, what the options, what you folks are looking for from us, because we're here to serve you folks, just like the funeral directors. You'll see the price increase. You'll also notice that on the back side, on page 3, these are the 6 vendors that come here the most. Funeral homes, we call them the vendors. You'll see also on one side there'll be Acton Monument, Louis Monte, and Riganini over in Clinton. These are the 3 monument companies that come here the most. The other ones are the funeral homes that come here the most. And that Fowler Kennedy, that's now run by Matt Fowler. Most of you remembered John Erb. He's still involved with it, but he's very silent about it now. Yep, pretty much retired, and things like that. He learned a secret from funeral home over in Hudson. The guy worked himself till he didn't get to enjoy retirement. So John decided that he didn't want to wait any longer on that. So those are the 6 people that come here the most. A deed, for instance, because I can't ask you folks to buy something that I wouldn't buy, so I just wrote up my own deed because I'm going to save myself $200. This is what a deed will look like. COA here has done their due diligence in trying to provide you folks with about anything and everything that they could possibly do within their means. So I give them the chance that they've helped me help you and succeed in your part of things, because there's a lot of towns that don't have this opportunity, especially in rural areas. You go out further west They don't save money for it. They don't bother with it. It took a lot of years for them to even get in here. And they did some due diligence to really do that. So that was part of volunteers that seem to hang around, that don't leave, but just hang with us. Some of the plans that we have gotten going. This is our latest purchase. The Derby family sold us 9 acres of land. It's the middle one called Partial A. We subdivided what Bob wanted from us. The other part will be housing. That's where the water well will go, that goes out there to the other areas. That was a $160,000 purchase and got 17 acres. A lot of towns do not have what we've been going. I've gone to Cemetery Association meetings. They don't have any land. They have to, pretty soon it'll be just cremations. It won't be the options of what we're offering here. This 9 acres right here is all woods. That's why we kind of consider ourselves land developers, because it's just woods. We used to have what we called a employee discount burial site. And it was just kind of a joke because it was our burn piles, our brush pile, which if you're residents, you can burn. Municipalities, EPA has closed us down to doing that now. I wish they would have waited till May 1st, but now we have to haul it, chip it. I believe the highway department, we work with the highway department. We help them because of what the storm damage you folks had. A lot of people had substantial enough of down trees, things in that fashion, and just not the roadside. I believe they're working on a program where you can bring your brush up to the highway department so they can chip it up. So those things can help you guys in that whole fashion. Any questions? How far do you want to go?
Take a typical funeral burial.
She's asking what's a typical funeral burial process. We'll get a call from one of the funeral homes. They'll let us know the time, date they're coming in. We call it the in time. If they're coming in at 11 o'clock.
You might want to make people know that we need about 10 death certificates from town when they die.
10?
Yeah, 10 to get everywhere they have to go.
Oh, that you mean the disposition papers and stuff like that? Yep. Yeah. His question was, there's a lot of paperwork that comes along with this. The town clerk has disposition paperwork. The state has some that comes along with things. You'll get a cremation or when you pass on, the paperwork will be going around. You'll have your death certificates. You'll have this, that. What comes to us is what they call the disposition paperwork for transportation and burial and where you're going to be buried. So when we get a call for a burial, if it's a full burial, I call Roger Wheeler over in Berlin. They've been doing it since they ever started they got rid of hand digging. And actually, Roger Wheeler, at almost 90 years old, just passed away, and he's going to be buried Saturday. His son, second generation, Paul, now comes. We've entertained the idea of having the highway department do it, but it's a very tricky digging. It ain't like digging in the ground and just doing things. You've got vaults next door. It's very detailed. You got to go slow. There's a lot of inquiring in that. A typical digging, if it's nice and easy without having issues, will probably take just over an hour. We fill it up, fill the dump truck, move it out back. We move all the material out of the site instead of leaving it like in the old days, leaving it there. Green burials, they would rather us not to use a backhoe. They want us to dig it by hand. And it's only about 3.5 feet because in green burials, they want the bacteria, after 3.5 to 4 feet, the bacteria doesn't decompose the body as fast. And they're looking for it to be faster. When we have our burials, we allow 1 hour from the end time. If it's 11 o'clock, we will sit there and we don't time them. Some families take longer, some don't. If you're at St. Isidore's or one of the other churches, they let us know and they proceed forward. One of the reasons we built the roads that you see there is because when you have a lot, most of the time it's young people, school teachers, things in that fashion, have a lot of followers, there's a lot of cars. The police got used to us where we can get 50 cars off of Gleasondale Road and in the cemetery rather quick. Once the burial is over with, then that's the next process is that we go and refill it. This land has been gone through the ice ages and things like this. There's a lot of compactation. And what happens after we have, let's say, a full burial with a vault, it will take 2 to 3 years before we can get the grass to really come up. There's always voids going on, they fall in, and we're always going. We put a flat marker on the ground, and it may sink. So it takes us a couple, 3 years before we can get it. We now have a process of hydroseeding. We started using hydroseeding, which we're getting better results. That's just for full burial. Cremations seem to be a little easier, except a lot of times if we're having an in-cemetery service, what happens then is people will show up before the time that the burial's coming on. And we want to have the family as close to that particular spot. A lot of times what happens is it's always the paperwork and it's always this or that. And whatever the families need or request from us, we try to take care of those things. Some of the requests are just, can you have a little bucket there for dirt? Sometimes people want to have this or that. I have only missed one burial on a cremation, and that was one of the biggest fears when I talked to the funeral directors, is that let's say you have a burial on the first week of April, for instance. You haven't flipped your calendar over, and there it is, a burial. And that's what happened here. We always tell families, because families can rearrange. They don't need to use funeral directors any longer with cremations. So what happened was this person that was in charge of the family said, yep, we're coming in on the first week, first Saturday. I says, call me when you're ready to do this. Give me a few days' notice. I didn't flip the calendar, and all of a sudden the police came up and said, and I was working Saturday, that I didn't dig the hole for them. I go over there, there's a whole family there. I'm embarrassed because I missed this, and this was our biggest fears. All the funeral directors, everybody had said the same thing, that something like this is going to happen. When he saw me, he sat there and said, this is all my fault. I was supposed to call you 4 to 5 to 7 days earlier, and I did not call you to remind you. I took right after that, they had the ceremony, went like that. As soon as they had left, I dug the hole and did that. I'm glad that I was still working there. Then the cops have to call me. Our duties have expanded from just doing cemetery work to my duties now I get the notices from the governor and the president of the United States when flags have to be brought down to half-mast. So when the flags you see at the library, town hall, and sometimes I get down there to Lower Village, but that's going to be a big mess here before long. I lower the flag, I bring it back up. The other duty I get, and I'm not sure why I got chose for this, except for maybe because I'm usually working with the passing of things. Animals that get roadside killed, I go and pick them up. If they're deer, raccoons, very few turtles, but they're kind of big. But if they're detrimental to driving, I go pick them up. We have now taken on, I think 14 years being here, I never plowed for the town. The truck we bought in 2000, we just put a plow on it. Now we do all the municipal grounds and maintenance of all the buildings, police station. It first started out as a favor, and if you can remember, you kind of wonder about saying yes to a favor. Can you do me a favor? From the town administrator. And he forgot to tell us that all it was that he was getting over inundated. The Hartley Road that goes to middle school, Hale School and stuff, and the new center school, the sidewalk wasn't getting plowed or taken care of. Everybody thought that the school district was going to pay, and they decided not to. So they incorporated me to do that. As soon as I said yes, from that time on, I do the library, the town hall, the town building, the police now for plowing, and I even help down here every so often. So you can see that cemetery has broadened from just being a part-time as-need basis. That's all we were really at. We were just, here you go. This is your job. Take care of the cemetery. It was a 20-hour gig that turned into a career. Follow my passion and what I like to do, so there we went.
Yes.
If you have been on the plot,
Yes.
and they say it's how many years do you have to wait to, if you're going to be cremated and burn, go down, what is it, 1 foot it goes in?
Almost.
It goes to about my knee, which is about 18 to 2 feet. When you buy a plot,
Okay, go ahead.
Rule of thumb,
Yep.
say 30 years, can you bury it on top of?
well, she got a good question. She's asking, how long does it take before you can bury on top of somebody or anything else like that? Before you used to be able to, they sell a plot. Let's say if two plots, mother and father, husband, wife. And that would be just about it. Since I've been here, they changed the ruling to allow 6 cremations on top of a burial right away. If you passed one day and we had to go in there, we put 6 cremations. So one lot turns into 7 plots. We looked at other towns, they were having 2 and 3 and things in that fashion. Sometimes we make sure with the funeral director that if there's a cremation and there's a full burial already next door, would it make more sense to put it on top and keep the other one for another family member to be a full burial? Once we start a cremations in a lot, we don't start to dig them up to put a full burial down below. So today, people are sitting there looking at land as a premium, so this helped us by doing that. We have to keep the records. We're really historians because a lot of people will ask genealogy, things going on. So that's part of my duty, paperwork, which has grown more than I would like to see it, because I'm not one for that, but it isn't just putting down a little bit of stuff in books like it used to be. Now it's computer, ancient documents, working with ancient documents now, because sooner or later it all turns to that. When you have a full burial and you can have 6 cremations on top, you're only allowed to have a flat markers there. When we sell 2 plots in a certain section, you can have an upright marker. You pay a little more money. Perpetual care is to help offset that account. When you give perpetual care money, the state requires that it goes into an account where when I first got here, it was running low at about $30,000 or so, maybe $35,000. We have $170,000 in that account, but you can only use the interest. Can't touch the principal in perpetual care money. Back in the time, some of the people, my committee members, decided that that was going to be used for beautification, because you didn't care how the job got done. We asked the town to pay for equipment and our salaries. What was happening was, and every town has their own version of perpetual care and how to spend that money. For instance, Hudson uses it for overtime on burials. It doesn't come out of their salaries. For us, our people just get paid strict pay. I'm on salary. I don't get any more if it's Saturday. We don't try to do too much on weekends. Well, actually, Sundays and holidays. On weekends, we charge $200 more. You see it on the paperwork there, because we found out that after 12 o'clock, people were taking advantage of us, because we all have families, we got other things to do. So they say, $200 more, can you get it to be on the weekday? Because they don't pay my help overtime. So what would happen then was my man would have to take a day off during the week, those hours, because we don't get paid overtime for that. So they can go out and do their own thing.
Question. On the single plot with the marker, there must be a limit on the size of the marker. Do you know what it is?
There, on a,
One,
Stone line flat.
yep, there's about 3 foot. 3 foot for about anywhere between 14 and 16 inch. That will hold 2 names, designs. We try not to involve ourselves with the designs. Acton, a family came over to us. We only sell to residents now. Years ago, they would charge a little more money for it. What we found out, people were just shopping for the cheapest cemetery around. And it was probably one of us.
That points out one question. Having bought a plot, if I should move away from Stow, which I don't expect,
You're,
Do I have to
you-
give the plot back?
what's that?
Do I have to give the plot back?
No,
If I move away from Stow?
well, you can always come back. When you pass on, then we'll go like that.
Perfect.
What happens, her question was, do I have to give the plot back if I move away? It's only with residents that can buy them. We can't tell you who to put in them. You can do what you like to do, but a lot of people move away when they get retirement. They want warmer weather, milder winters. That's my goal when I hit about 70 or so. And actually, this is a good time of weather for me. Now I want it in January and February. If you want to snow, go ahead. I don't have to plow it. Just let it go melt away. That's good. So when people buy the plots, in a ruling from the state, they called it the 75-year rule. If a family doesn't use the plot in 75 years, it reverts back to the cemetery. But it comes back from the last time you had a burial, not when you bought it. So we look in, some people want to be buried in the older section or something. We might find something. Our general rule is about 100 years.
How does that work out if, say you've got 3 plots and the cemetery stone has been put in the middle of it? Somebody gets buried there, where do they put their stone?
They won't get one. They have to have 2. If you used up 2 and there was a 3rd one, they wouldn't get that.
They wouldn't get the plot, or
They would get the plot, but they would get a flat marker. Everything's about maintenance for us. In the newer section where we're having them, where you buy 2 plots, there's over 50 inches that we run our lawnmowers, which are 54 inch. The bigger one is 54, 52, and 44. We want to be able to go right down through. In Mount Albans, they paint their lawnmowers different colors for each rider. Because if they hit stones, they know who did it. They get less, depending on the severity of the damage, they could be gone. And they all know that. I tell my guys, in fact, one of my committee members, when he came to work here, I nicknamed him Rudy. Because you'll see around our trees, we have some big roots and we have mulch. I just use wood chips around that because we couldn't afford it. Being uneven ground, he hit it with the lawnmower and it actually broke the spindle, bent the blade. He was only there for about a month. It was finally, I said, okay, you're all by yourself. I'm going to go down to Lower Village. And when he drove up, I said, this can't be good. And sure enough, I said, oh, easy fix, everything else like that. He didn't hurt anything except for the lawnmower. So from that point on, I call him Rudy for hitting the root. And I actually brought it up to the committee meeting yesterday. Oh, this old Rudy. I always find something. We have to be careful with some of the really older stones, Lower Village, this and that. I had a lot of people that supported me outside of my committee members when we did all the stone walls over. We had to go to community preservations because we didn't have the money, because it costs quite a bit to get them where you want them. And then the guy that came in to do the stones, he showed me some techniques on repairing stones. So that's where perpetual care comes in. We can buy the supplies, we can use that kind of money for that stuff. Sales of lot, we use that for construction reasons. We have to be moving out of Crescent Street Garage, the old highway department here, and now we're going to have to buy some temporary sheds or something so we can put that kind of material that we have in there. We bought all the markings. We have about 1,400 markers ready to go in the ground, but we're not putting them in until we open the sections. It costs less years ago than it does now. When we're planning ahead, we're looking at that kind of planning. So those things will be going into boxes that we're going to have storage. We're developing that land. When you see some of the drawings out there where the building will eventually probably end up going, we just cleared another I'm not going to say a half an acre, quarter of an acre of trees so we can have an area so we're in the process of taking our leaves and mulching them, composting them, so we have more loam. We saved all the loam when we took the roads out, had partly screened it, and we have a big mound out there. It's as tall as this building, tall as this room, and probably 100 feet long. We recycle as much as we can possibly do. When we pick up all the flowers and stuff like that, we put them back into the earth and let them decompose. All the rubbish goes into a dumpster. That was the very first thing that we did, was buy a dumpster. So we could just take the paper scraps and stuff away. We don't want to see any more that comes along. We're working with conservation and a vernal pond that we're working around, so we want to be able to make sure we're 100 feet away from there. There's another part of it on this new piece. We got to be 200 feet away from any rivers or anything like that. Well, we don't have that issue. So we're trying to get, planning for the future was one of our biggest things, because we're all going to pass somewhere along the line. When it happens, you want to be ready. Yes?
In Central Europe, where land is very limited,
Yep.
Families don't buy the plot, but they rent it.
Some countries do, yes.
And when the rent starts coming in, then it's back into the pool, and they dig up the grave and put the bones in a boneyard.
Yep.
Does that happen anywhere around here?
Not that I heard in America, because it's so old and things like that. I think it was a woman that came from England. She was surprised to see the cemetery the way it was, because they never kept perpetual care. Next thing you know, a lot of old cemeteries are in disarray in England, Scotland, and in that fashion. That's why perpetual care continues to try to maintain that. In some old countries, let's say that you bought 2 family plots. Somebody passed away 10 years prior to that. Another family member just passed away. They will dig up the remains and put them in tombs or bone orchards, like you say. That's probably the way that comes about. They have a different viewpoint about burying. America wants to save everything, a stone, a monument, any of that, trees and stuff in that fashion. Because of our area being so open, because it was apple orchard, C.D. Fletcher owned the property, and then Bob bought some of it, and things in that fashion. So the history is there for us. So in that fashion, we're buying trees, and we're going to have some trees. We have 6-foot paths there, and so we break up the cemetery certain sections.
Can you describe what a flat marker is?
Yep.
A military marker, anything that you want. The names, the dates, the death dates. I encourage.
Like a flat stone?
Yep.
Most of the time it's about 3 to 4 inches. And let's say a military one, I'll say, is about 12, 14 inches. And then it's just about almost squared, just about rectangular. If it's 16 inches, it might be 12 to 14.
Okay. With cremation, you say 6 people can be buried. Do you take that into account when you make the first burial?
Mm-hmm.
So say there's a husband and wife that, are cremated, so then, a son or a daughter passes away and you want them buried there.
We'll ask what side they want to be on. I ask what side.
So you don't know how many necessarily will be buried in a plot that's cremated? Okay.
Some people know exactly. They come out and draw where their family members want to be. And some just say, because times have changed where jobs take a lot of people away from their hometowns. I didn't know where my hometown was going to be. I asked my mother that when we were moving from Nashua, New Hampshire to Jacksonville, Florida. My father was in the Navy. My parents were in the Navy. I have at least 6, from what I can understand, 6 to 7 school districts that I was raised in. About every 3 years, booking from Newport, Rhode Island. I was the only one born in Waltham. My mother and father came from Sudbury, over where Fairbanks School or Fairbanks Community is. Just down the hill from there is where we used to meet and go like that. So for me, I asked my mother, we're driving down to Florida. I says, where's my hometown going to be? She says, sooner or later when you settle down enough, you might find it. Apparently it's got to be Stow because I'm buying a plot here. So there's going to be my last little piece of property I got to pay for. Hopefully. I'm only 63 now, and I hope to be in this position till about 70. Not that it's a big goal, but it's just something for me to look forward to. I'd like to be able to think, when I turned 61, my sister bought me a cake and it had the numerals, the 61 on it, and I happened to take them off and at home, and it looked like 91, and I says, that's a good goal to go, so it's right on my little battery-operated soap dispensary that says 91. I studied the healing arts for the Oriental healing arts and Native American, and it just really helped me say, you got to take care of yourself. You're not going to be able to take care of yourself if you're going to count on the government. And yet I was raised by the government. That's why I say this identity. My mother was very surprised when she moved back from Florida up here to find out that I was part of a government identity. She knew that I was a little rambunctious at those younger years and some of the stories. I'm hoping that I guess you call them the statute of limitations are over with. I never harmed anybody except for myself, but I just worked hard and I played pretty hard sometimes. C.D. Fletcher, I never met him at the Orchard, but Charlie Lord and Chucky and all them helped round me up a little bit. And Charlie said, this is a very good job for you. It's outside and no one's really, you got a lot of people under you and they're not giving you problems. So, it's helped me. I don't know where I would be without what happened here. I just let things happen. Sometimes we get in a way for our careers and we do this and that. I just let this happen and just let it flow, and next thing you know, I found myself, falling in love with not only what I'm doing, but how I can help other people in a different capacity. People have been appreciated of me, and I've been appreciated more of them. I have a bunch of people that push me a little hard sometimes, but it's only for my own betterment and betterment for people around. Some people really, a lot of people have seen what pre-planning could and could not do for them, not knowing, and sudden passing of people. It's not an easy thing sometimes for people to take, and we try to take that into account. For whatever reasons, we just help them in any way that we can help them at all, at any particular time, right?
Could you give us ballpark figures for a double lot?
Yep.
And with a marker, upright marker?
Upright marker. Right now it's $600 a piece. It would be $1,200. What we ask for is $300 more per plot, $150 per, because of if the concrete, you'll see it on the second page. If the concrete isn't done right by the monument company, I used to try doing it, but I found out that they have to guarantee it for a certain amount of time. If it doesn't fall apart at 50 years or so, I was repairing them. So they do that, they'll set the markers and things in that. It would be $1,500 for two today. After July, I believe, I'm not sure, what's it say right there? After July, be about $2,000.
2,000, okay.
That double plot with the upright marker is one marker.
Two.
Two markers.
One marker, two plots.
Two plots. Right?
Yep.
That's what I thought. And the backhoe service is listed on opening is in addition to the above?
Yep.
We had this conversation some time ago that we can't predict what it would cost for an opening later on. Like, I believe if you made arrangements with funeral homes, they can give you an idea. They have the capabilities of taking your money, putting it in some kind of account so it could be interest bearing, so they could be able to keep up with the cost of what do you want to call it? Inflation. And that's one of the things that happen when we finally retire. To me, is there's those secret things that really happen. Is we don't count on inflation. We don't count on the cost of living increasing. We don't count on products continually going up. Taxes will continue growing. That's why to have a set price for openings, it used to be done by hand. They were doing it in 1972, was doing the digging by hand. We can't find people to do work as much anymore, laborers. We're having quite a challenge. And it's just not here. I had a story from Hungary. They had a competition who could dig a grave the fastest. And one of the reasons they were doing it was to promote health. And they bought the idea was, let's have this as a competition. It had to be squared right. It had to be placed right. Everything in that fashion. And one of the comments was, we're trying to attract young people to do this kind of work. And it was amazing, it's almost everywhere. That you can't find people to do a lot of work just any old place anymore. It's hard to. Qualified people, the highway department was just asked by the town administrator. They hired somebody and they says, this person doesn't seem to have a qualification, because if you're a laborer, truck driver, you're supposed to have a CDL license, you're supposed to have a work history and things like that. And what we found out, the people seem to be so overqualified that they don't want to do anything. So it was very upsetting to hear that. So they hired the guy that had a farm background, and it kind of related to me because we're fought to work. I was guilty of too many hours, but I was salary, so things had to get done, and most of the time I was doing it by myself. Any other questions?
Yeah. On the opening costs,
Yep.
listed on the sheet on page 2, those opening costs, are they prepaid with the plot, or is that due at the time?
Due to the time of the passing.
So the 7, hopefully, will make it to the 7/1/2018, so those would be the anticipated costs.
Yep.
We don't pass before that time.
Right, that's what it will be by that time.
Okay, thank you.
That,
Your plot, right now you buy your plot for the 600. That's what I'm doing. I didn't even tell my committee members that.
Thank you.
There was, some people don't ever see the annual report, but on the back side of this showed grave markers. And what they did was they had, this is called a ground penetrating radar sled that found, I believe, between Hillside and Lower Village, 355 unmarked graves. People couldn't afford things back in the day, things in that fashion. I even see it now. A lot of people promise to buy grave sites or monuments and things, and they just, everyday life happens and they don't get to it until all of a sudden something sparks them to come and take care of things. When you buy a monument, my suggestion is to get as much information on it, because a digit that may cost $30 today will cost you more if you don't put all you want to put on it. Your designs, they have such designs now, you can take a picture and have it etched in it. It isn't all done by hand anymore, but it costs. I don't know prices, because everybody has their own little way of doing things. So if you wanted both your birth dates, and you can leave the death date till later. Hopefully you can keep dancing with us, because I tell people, pre-planning, they can do that. I've seen it one time of a gentleman waited until he finally got into, I guess, plantation down there, and he passed away about a year after he coming in, and wanting to do things, and then about 6 months to a year, it felt very well for him. He finally passed on, and his wife come to me and says, that was the last thing that he had to make arrangements for. And I says, wow, that's okay to one thing, but I'd rather see people keep going on with us. If we do beat the process, 30% of elderly in town, we might have a better chance at the school kids. But it was interesting that they went like this. We gave them permission to do this because all work has to be okayed. And they left these markers here because if we decide to utilize that, we wouldn't be disturbing anything down below. And in those cemeteries, we're not allowing upright markers there. They could only be flat markers because we didn't want to lose the integrity of the cemetery, the way it looks with the old tablets. There are some artificial ones that are up in Harvard. They just don't look right. It's a compository of recycled material. It's more shinier. It doesn't seem. We don't have as much acid rain coming from the Detroit automakers. There was a lot of years that you wouldn't want to have a black stone, and that's polished very deeply, and it would be just turn into gray after years of it. Would be just like you have in granite. So.
One quick question. If you're cremated, you don't really need a plot. You can just scatter the ashes. Isn't that true?
You can. There's sometimes regulations. I'm not quite sure. You just, for instance, some people like to go out to sea. They say that the fragments, because there'd be some bone chips, because it's 1,800 degrees to break down a body. So they'll sift through the bigger pieces and you get a small bag. It has an identification tag that I call the dog tag. That's what you end up with. If it's a paper box or whatever, and you can put it in a urine. But like you're saying, you could scatter it. If you're on a boat, the captain's in charge. If you go and tell him that, he may or may not allow you to do that because it gets into the gills of the fish. So if you go to a pond and you put it out there, but you go to a family, we're trying to look at an area that we want to call a scattering area and maybe have a small area for plaques to say that somebody had hit in here. The closest thing I can say about the condensity of cremations, if anybody has ever burnt wood in their house and they walk out to their garden and they throw it down and then all of a sudden it rains and everything else, it becomes a really mush. That's how that ends up being. So if you're going to scatter it, if you have permission on land and stuff like that, then give it. I don't know if anybody's seen the movie The Bridges of Madison County, where they threw it out and all of a sudden here it is, it blows in the air. Well, you better make sure the wind's going in the right way because it can come back to you. So, but you could be in trouble. I don't recommend it, but don't tell people. If you have small families and things like that, you go out in the ocean at a beach or something, make sure it's very low-keyed and the waves are going out, not in.
When my husband passed away, he wanted to have his ashes scattered in water because he was an avid fisherman. So off Clearwater Beach in Florida, 15 miles out, there is a veterans reef that was made from World War II planes that were sunk.
Yep.
And there's a flag there, American flag. They call it the Veterans Reef. So what we hired a boat, and there was about 24 of us, and we went. And what they have a special word that they dump the ashes into this absorbent urn, and it floats, and it just disintegrates easily. So
Like
the
paper
water
or
doesn't,
something,
I mean,
yeah.
ashes don't fly, it's really, you know.
Yeah, every state, everything else has, different ways of handling stuff nowadays. I mean, just like the state doesn't require you to have a vault, but they leave it up to the town and the committee to do that, and that's what they decided. They didn't want people falling in, and now that was one of my very first things learning here, because when I went to work, I worked for the Board of Health as a farm personnel that would help out, and I would count the farm animals. Unannounced to me that once I handed in the farm book, that's when the assessors would charge 25 cents for a chicken. But if it wasn't business, and at one time they called them piggeries because of one of the guys was out of line having pigs that were not being well cared for. So they didn't want piggeries as a business, like cattle and sheep and things like that. They're a little less messier, but pigs are cleaner if you keep them. I didn't get the name groundhog because I was always clean, that's for sure.
I have another question that came up when you were talking about markers and which you would having done now. For example, if you have a marker, nobody's dead, you just have the names and birth date. Can you put that down on your plot?
Now?
Now.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you told me you had 6, or you and your husband's going to be there, you buy a big 3-foot marker, and you told me that you were going to have 6 or 4 more other burials there, then what we would do is pull that marker up and put you underneath it, and put the marker back over it.
And if it's only going to be 2, the marker could stay
And we could put, yeah.
That's neat, I like that. Thank you.
We allow people to, for instance, plant perennials. Before they used to leave them in baskets. And when I got on board, I told them, why don't we have perennials? They come back every year. We know the guys are going to run them over anyways. And it was a nice, easier thing. Plus, it saved water. You don't have to water them as much as long as they take. But some people like to water. All righty.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And ladies and gentlemen, if anyone didn't sign in, could you please give me your name and I can enter it in?
Okay, so that's not available now.
Right. But one of our commitments to law was, like he did here, his commitment to his family, to their boundaries. So it hasn't been plotted out yet.